Are Sherrone Moore and Jonathan Smith on the hot seat? It's only been 1 year since they were hired at Michigan and Michigan State, respectively. But a viewer of my channel, a Super Saiyan Magikarp, very cool name, member of our Discord server for a while. If you want to join the Discord server, by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier, check the link in the description, and I'll also post a comment in the comment section. Click that link, you'll be a member of the Discord server, and if you want to ask questions that are turned into videos, just look for the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel in the Discord server, type your question in there, and I'm going to log it on a Google Sheet that I actually have pulled up right now so I can read the question verbatim, and then you'll probably see your question on this live show, and a whole video will be made about it. So, Super Saiyan Magikarp asked verbatim, are Sherrone Moore and Jonathan Smith on the hot seat, in parentheses, MSU new athletic director. He referred to Sherrone Moore potentially getting a show cause or a suspension that would either, fire him or suspend him, which would probably ramp up pressure for him to win some more games to compensate for that. And also mentioned how Michigan State recently let go of Alan Haller, and they're looking for a new athletic director who has better, quote, fundraising abilities. Also known as Michigan State wants to be good at football. They want to be good at sports. They want to be competitive in NIL. They want to rally some of the billionaires and millionaires they have as potential boosters and certainly as a university alumni, which Michigan has done, but Michigan also had the same problem for quite some time. Both of these schools last year in the regular season combined for a 12-12 record and a 8-12 record in Big Ten Conference play. That had to be one of the worst seasons in recent memory, excluding the COVID year, for Michigan State and Michigan football. For football in the state of Michigan, period, amen. It was bad. I don't know about the MAC, though. I think actually Eastern Michigan may have had a okay season, but maybe my memory is incorrect. I know Western went to a bowl game, played Wisconsin pretty tight, but they got blown out by the Buckeyes. And as for Central Michigan, Jim McElwain retired. But the point of this segment is whether Sherrone Moore and Jonathan Smith are on the hot seat. And I don't know exactly. I'm not inside any of the locker rooms. I'm not a fly on the wall of Ward Manuel's office or the interim MSUAD's office, whose name I forget because that person's an interim athletic director. They're not going to be making many important decisions, and if they do, then I will know their name because it's relevant. But regardless, I can say from an outside voice looking at the situation here, I think they're certainly under pressure. Certainly. I think that if Sherrone Moore and Michigan get hit with anything, whether it's like sanctions wise, more so I would say like almost recruiting, maybe postseason ban, although at that point, that's kind of for actions done by the previous staff, which Sherrone Moore was a part of. I don't intuitively think that'll happen, but I could be wrong, and I'm not making a prediction here on any of that stuff. Just excited to see what it is. But you look at maybe recruiting penalties, like that will affect Michigan more long term. If, somehow their NIL is limited, or somehow they maybe instead of taking away scholarship spots, they just straight up take away roster spots because scholarships are just, pennies compared to the money that the donors and the universities bring in now to pay their players, for example. So that's the side of it with Michigan. If Sherrone Moore once again has a 7-5 campaign, or I would even say an 8-4 campaign, where they underperform on their win total again, and or if on top of that there are punishments that are directly tied to Moore that really affect the team's capability of winning at the highest level, then yeah, that ramps up the pressure for sure. And there already is pressure on him. Look, last season for Michigan was a failure. It was anything but a success. Going 8-5 at Michigan is a failure. It's the same thing at any blue blood school, with the exception of Nebraska. And after Nebraska finally goes 8-5 under Matt Rule, which will either be this year or next year, I'd say most likely this season, then going 8-5 again for Nebraska would not be a successful season. Like, if you are a blue blood, 8-5 is never the norm, or at least should never be the norm, and is always a failure. Even for Michigan State, only going 8-5 consistently and never going any higher would be a failure. But the problem with the Spartans is they can't even reach a bowl game. Last year, they came close at different points, but ultimately, at the end of the year, whether it was against Illinois, whether it was Indiana, or especially the Rutgers game, they just imploded. It was clear that they weren't deep enough. It was clear that I think some players checked out, and other teams wanted it more, like Rutgers, for example. They wanted that game more than Michigan State did. And Tucker left Jonathan Smith in a very bad place. But Tucker, in the I would say in the ideal situation, almost fit what most people think is a Michigan State coach better than Jonathan Smith does. Smith is from the West Coast, doesn't have many connections out here, is kind of a quiet guy, more of a tactician, more of a guy to go in the booth and scheme things up. Tucker is, in 2016 where Urban Meyer is like pumping up the Buckeye crowd and like doing this. Like that's who Mel Tucker is, like complete rah-rah guy. And I think that fits Michigan State, I think, more recently, whether it's, D'Antonio and some words that D'Antonio would say, whether it was about Michigan or other teams, like some snide comments that were, kind of funny because Michigan State was good and they had the right at that point to talk trash, and it made sense why they did. And then you go to Tucker, and Tucker's all about how, we're going to out-recruit Michigan. We're going to out-recruit Notre Dame. We're going to be competitive with Ohio State, even though on the field they weren't. And Smith isn't like that. Smith isn't, loud and outgoing, and recruiting right now is at the worst it's ever been. And the team finished with probably the worst loss suffered by a non-interim head coach that I can remember, outside of maybe the 2019 Illinois-Michigan State game. So, yes, both of these coaches are under pressure. I want to zoom in a little bit about Michigan first, and just talk about, their schedule, win total, general expectations, and some stuff about their team. And then we'll do that with Michigan State as well. So with Michigan, zooming on them for, a minute or two, they get New Mexico in week 1, travel to Oklahoma week 2, they get Central Michigan week 3 at home. They travel to Nebraska in week 4. The CMU and Nebraska games, Sherrone Moore will be suspended in those, self-imposed by Michigan. During week 5, they have a bye in week 6 against Wisconsin. They host them in the Big House. They travel all the way out to Los Angeles to play USC in week 7. They host Washington in week 8, travel to rival Michigan State in week 9. It's a big game, by the way, for both of these teams. Host Purdue in week 10. Michigan gets a bye in week 11 before traveling to Wrigley Field to play Northwestern in a neutral site game, then traveling to Maryland in week 13, and then hosting Ohio State in the game to end the regular season. This Michigan schedule, I will tell you right now, you want to know how Sherrone Moore can impress the entire college football world in a realistic sense? Some of you may think this is insane. Bear with me. You go 12-0. Now you go 12-0 and then you win the Big Ten, you're not winning a playoff game. Because whatever team advances then to the quarterfinals to play you in probably the Rose Bowl will probably be better than you and beat you and exploit your weaknesses. But which of these teams is a guaranteed loss? Ohio State's not. They don't match up well with Michigan at all in the trenches. And they also have a mental disadvantage against them. I mean, Ryan Day himself said that losing to Michigan was the equivalent of losing his dad. And that is, I almost feel bad mentioning that. Like, that's something that I personally hope Ryan Day gets over. Like, that he can separate those two, because losing a family member is far worse than losing the game. It just is. Straight up. It is. But until Day figures that out, that's going to be a huge disadvantage. And the only time I've seen Ryan Day play Michigan with an aggressive, competent game plan was in 2023, when Ohio State was an underdog. And I don't think Ohio State's going to be an underdog to this Michigan team because this Michigan team isn't going to be dominant enough. And if this Michigan team is dominant enough, and Ohio State at the same time doesn't have everything going for them, then again, circle back to the matchups. So that is Michigan's toughest game, power ratings-wise, is Ohio State. They have a mental edge over them. They have matchup edges over them. USC is the only other game I can see being in that category with Ohio State. Or maybe Oklahoma because it's early against a quarterback who's talented but very young and who has not faced a defense that good. Oklahoma, their O-line has questions, and I think their offense will still be limited as it's also early for them. USC, it's a long travel. The time zone change will be hard. And USC, I think, with their staff in year two, especially on defense, and the fact that Lincoln Riley's offense should regress to the mean and improve, that's also going to be a tough game. I think, personally, Michigan isn't going to go 12-0. I'm not predicting that. However, they can. And that is how you come out and you just remove pressure. Like you no longer have any pressure on your back if you're Sherrone Moore and you go 12-0, and then this team won't win the national title. They won't. I'm 95% sure, 98% sure, 99% sure of that. But they can win the Big Ten. They can do what Oregon did last year in their best case scenario. You do that, you relieve pressure, and you make sure that your concerns at wide receiver and tackle are either minimized, or with how you've recruited at tackle, you explode there. You play Bryce Underwood's game while also balancing the strengths of the roster. So you take shots, you scheme your receivers open, but you run the ball with a running back room that might be 3 deep or even a little bit deeper with some of the transfers they added and how they've, recruited there through the portal and high school with Jordan Marshall. You make sure that your defense sticks to what the latter half of the season showcased, where you're being simple, you're not putting D tackles at outside linebacker. Never want to see that again from Wink Martindale. That's just insane. I think anyone, no matter what your fan base, can agree with that. That's just egregious. And you play to your strengths there. You make teams pass on you. You tell teams that they will not run on you, and you don't let them run on you. And the D-line comes close to reloading. Like, you go to the best case scenario, Michigan is once again in the national title conversation, even if they most likely can't win it, or more likely than that will get blown out pretty badly in the playoffs against a really good team, a real natty caliber team. But you go 12-0, and then in 2026, when Underwood's, in another year, and Michigan may have another top 10 recruiting class, and the staff has more continuity, continues to get more experience under their belt and improves, then you can have that breakthrough year again, and Michigan really being on top of college football. For Michigan State, whoops, didn't mean to do that, hit the wrong button. For Michigan State, that's the next topic, by the way, in this live show. So this is actually, accidents can sometimes produce good things. If you are watching this when it's a video cut and you wondering, wait, why were you switching to a topic about Oregon? That's because this was a live show cut. If you want to watch the full live show episodes and do it live, you get to occasionally ask me questions or engage with me. Hit the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, like the video. And also, if you want to engage with me, period, just type in the comment section below, and I'll happily engage with you to talk about these two coaches. For Michigan State, it's different. Michigan State's over-under win total's not 8.5, and they don't have a 5-star QB and a potentially top 5 defense. Their over-under win total's 5.5, juiced to the over. They're expected to basically go 6-6, and if they don't, they're more likely to go 5-7 than 7-5. However, I think Michigan State's staff is way better than Michigan's. They just unfortunately don't have the talent that Michigan's does. If Michigan State's staff had Michigan's current talent, I would predict that team to get 11-12 wins and maybe even reach the semifinals. That's how talented I think Michigan's roster is. That's how good I think MSU's staff is. Maybe I'm delusional on both counts, but Jonathan Smith is a wizard. Joe Rossi is a proven DC. Lindgren is a great OC. And then they have other position coaches who have developed NFL players basically out of thin air at Oregon State. Aiden Childs has to take steps forward. He can't be throwing nearly 5 interceptions per game or 6 like he did against Boston College. One of my favorite Valenti bits is that Boston College, thankfully, was outfitted with hamburger helper mitts instead of gloves, because he said, and he wasn't wrong, he was correct, completely correct, that there were 6 passes that could have been intercepted. You can't have Childs looking that way in year 2 and then expect your fan base to believe in you, especially when recruiting is this bad and the way they finished last season was pathetic. Michigan State's roster, well, pretty bad from the Tucker era, and I kind of give Smith and his staff complete grace for last season. They're now in year 2. They've gotten some development on these guys. They've gotten some of their own players in through the portal, and maybe there's 1 or 2 freshmen who really pop out. You have to do better than 5-7, especially since you don't play Oregon on the road. You don't play Ohio State at home. You play Penn State at home off of a bye. You play Michigan at home, and in the same way that Ohio State has a mental disadvantage to Michigan, Michigan does not typically play without fog in their brain against MSU, just to put it lightly. In week 1, Michigan State plays Western Michigan, should be a win. Boston College in week 2 should be a win, but not guaranteed based off of last season. Youngstown State should be a win. You want to impress the college football universe. If you're Jonathan Smith, you want to get off the hot seat. If you're MSU football and you're an MSU fan and you want to, know that this team's going in the right direction, Michigan State goes down to USC. Well, they're probably still getting some things figured out. It might be a sleaze fest. I mean, that could maybe be a Friday game. I don't know, but it kind of feels like a Friday game. Go down. People aren't all that interested. And maybe you do to USC, worst case scenario for the Trojans, and I don't think this will happen, but maybe you do to them a little bit what Illinois did to Wisconsin in 2022. Or maybe you go down and beat them, and USC's really, really good, but you're good too, and you can steal games despite having inferior talent. It's actually the same thing, I think, with Nebraska in week 6 off the bye. Both Nebraska and Michigan State come off a bye. Smith is better in his career than Rule off the bye. Go into Lincoln, where teams have won before, and beat them. Just do it. Make sure you beat UCLA in week 7, Indiana in week 8. If they come back down to earth, try and beat them. Michigan is a rival who's been beatable. You face them in week 9. Michigan State travels to Minnesota in week 10, then they get a bye in week 11, host Penn State week 12, play at Iowa week 13, and then face Maryland off in a neutral field in Ford Field in Detroit on what may be a Friday night game. I don't know. We'll ultimately have to see. They did this 2 years back, and it was a Friday night game between Penn State and Michigan State. So we'll see if it's that as well. But if you're the Spartans, by all means, go out and win 7 games, and in your 5 losses, have probably all of them except the Penn State and maybe Indiana game be extremely competitive and where you show fight. Or go out and win 8 games. I mean, this team, I think if everything goes right, this team can win 9 games. Probably not a college football playoff contender, but they can contend for a top 25 finish. So I believe, and thank you Super Saiyan Maggie Carp for asking this question. I think it's a very good one, creative one. I believe both of these teams are facing deep competitive pressure. They're being rightfully questioned after last year. Hot seat? Not yet, but the final piece of my answer that I'll provide is I believe, given the new situation at MSU with the changing of the AD and with the fact that Sherrone Moore's contract isn't big and there's still investigative stuff going on with Michigan relating to the cheating scandal, I would say that when the seat gets hot, there will not be that much of an instinct to hold back from firing either Moore or Smith. So if both of them have disastrous seasons, if Moore goes 7-5 again, or maybe even they go 6-6, or if MSU goes 4-8, 5-7 again, it wouldn't shock me if they were both fired after only year 2. Their buyouts are somewhat small. If Michigan State's gotten reinvestment from the billionaires, well, they'll have more money than they've had over the previous 24 months. And then if you're Michigan, you have the donors involved. Michigan clearly wants to win at a high level. If you go, I'll say it right here. If Michigan goes 6-6 or 7-5 and beats Ohio State again, I won't care. And you shouldn't care either. I mean, you should accurately view it as a failure. It's the same thing, by the way. If MSU goes 5-7 and they beat Michigan, like, I won't care. Who cares? That's not good enough. You can't just beat your rival and be bad. Michigan State and Michigan are too good for that, as someone who lives in the state of Michigan. I think I'm inclined to believe that both will survive into 2026, and from there will be more of a final verdict, especially as it relates to Sherrone Moore.